If forests can no longer hide them, if rivers can no longer shield them, where will terror run next? Once, in the forgotten edges of Burkina Faso, shadows ruled. Gunmen moved like ghosts through thick trees, setting up checkpoints on lonely roads. Villages lived in silence, too afraid to scream. The East and Center East were not just maps, they were scars. But something has changed, and it's happening now. Two military operations, Kalari and Ilgende, have begun rewriting the rules, not just by firepower, but with precision, not with slow patrols, but by hunting shadows in real time. Kalari isn't just a battle. Ilgende isn't just a mission. They are proof. Proof that under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso is no longer retreating. It is advancing. This video is not about what happened. It's about what's happening right now in forests where terrorists once felt invincible. And we ask you this: if the forests no longer offer safety and the skies no longer stay silent, can terror still survive? Stay with us as we uncover a story of transformation, a new military doctrine, and a war that is turning. This isn't just Africa news. This is the front line of a global battle, and it begins with Kalari. Where can terror still hide in Burkina Faso, Eastern Burkina Faso? For years, it was where fear grew like roots in the ground. In dense forests and forgotten trails, armed groups thrived. Villages emptied, roads turned into ambush zones. Children whispered stories of men with rifles appearing from the trees, then vanishing like smoke. And then came Kalari. It didn't start with noise. It started with silence. For weeks, intelligence units listened, watched, and waited. They discovered something, a hidden compound deep beneath thick canopy, where militants drilled in darkness. They thought nature made them invisible, but above them, the sky had eyes. High above, drones circled, patient and precise. They mapped movements, cataloged weapons, recorded routines, and then they waited, because Kalari was not about chaos. It was about calculation. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the first strike came. A single missile tore through the trees, igniting the night sky and the entire militant base with it. Panic erupted. Fighters scattered, some shooting blindly upward, others trying to flee into the forest. But escape was never part of the plan. The second strike followed seconds later, wiping out what remained. What once was a stronghold was now just smoke and ash. But Kalari did more than destroy a camp. It destroyed confidence. For years, terrorists believed they were untouchable, that the state couldn't find them, that thick leaves and distant roads were enough. Kalari proved otherwise. It showed that Burkina Faso now controls the skies, and that every shadow could be lit up in a moment. Villagers returned to fields once too dangerous to farm. Children walked roads once ruled by fear. For them, Kalari wasn't just a strike. It was liberation. And for the military, it was a turning point. A demonstration of what happens when intelligence meets precision. No massive troop movements. No drawn-out firefights. Just the right strike, at the right time, in the right place. This is not the war Burkina Faso used to fight. It's the war it was forced to learn, fast. So now, ask yourself, if even the forest can no longer protect them, where will terror run next? Because the sky is no longer neutral. It belongs to the people now. And Kalari was just the beginning. Ilgende strikes back. No safe haven left. If Kalari was a warning, Ilgende was the answer. In Burkina Faso's center-east, the village of Yorudkin had become a symbol of survival. Trapped between forests and forgotten roads, it had endured raids, ambushes, and silence. Militants came at night, took what they wanted, and disappeared before dawn, and the state, slow, stretched thin, often arrived too late. But not this time. In the early hours, a local defense post near Yarudkin came under fire, a coordinated strike by armed groups aiming to provoke chaos. In the past, such an attack would paralyze the region for weeks. This time, the response came within hours. No waiting, no hesitation. Aerial surveillance picked up the fleeing attackers as they retreated into the Terrell forest. They believed the thick vegetation would protect them. That old tricks, mud walls, empty courtyards, silent pathways would still work. They were wrong. From the sky came precision fire, not random, not reckless. Each strike measured, mapped, and executed. The forest shook. Homes long abandoned by civilians crumbled under the weight of explosions. There were no innocents left inside, only invaders. The tree line that once offered camouflage became a trap. Some fighters tried to escape, running toward the riverbanks of Kabonga. They paused under the cover of low branches, convinced they were safe. But the drones had followed. So did the strike units. At 3:47 a.m., a targeted missile exploded near their fuel cache. The firestorm that followed lit up the river like a second sun. Those who fled into the undergrowth were not spared. They were hunted, tracked, and neutralized by the second wave. Ilgende wasn't just retaliation, it was a doctrinal shift. The old war waited for militants to build camps, dig in, and strike. The new war catches them while they move, before they're ready, before they can disappear. It's not just about reclaiming land. It's about denying space. No more safe havens. No more untouched zones. No more forests turned into fortresses. For the communities of Center East, the victory was transformational. Markets reopened. Roads cleared. Children laughed again. The fear that had lived in every shadow began to fade. For the army, Ilgende validated a new model, a blend of air dominance, intelligence coordination, and rapid deployment. But most of all, it proved something deeper, that Burkina Faso is no longer reacting. It is leading. And now, a harder question arises. If every movement is now vulnerable, and every forest can be struck from the sky, how long before the insurgents run out of ground to stand on? Ilgende did not just kill fighters. It killed a myth. The myth that terrorists can vanish into trees and never be found. That myth is gone, and the fight is no longer one of fear. It's one of momentum. From fear to resolve in Burkina Faso, victory is no longer measured in territory. It's measured in movement. The sound of footsteps returning to fields once abandoned. The laughter of children playing on roads once ruled by fear. The reopening of village markets under clear skies. These are the real victories of Kalari and Ilgendé. For years, conflict fractured the very identity of the nation. People stopped trusting maps because borders meant nothing if you couldn't walk past them. People stopped trusting time because no one knew if tomorrow would come. But something has shifted, and it began not with a speech, not with international support, but with a strike, a moment when the sky lit up and fear cracked like dry bark. Kalari and Ilgende are not just names on a military ledger. They're symbols. To the farmer in Boulay du Mahun, they mean one thing: my land is mine again. To the mother in Yarudkin, they mean, my children can go to school without a goodbye that sounds like the last. But these victories carry more than emotional weight. They carry political power. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, these operations are the fulfillment of a promise that the state would no longer beg for peace, but create it. That Burkina Faso would no longer outsource its survival to foreign interests or NGOs, but would reclaim its fate with its own hands. This strategy, this shift, did not happen by accident. When Traoré took power, many doubted. They said the army was too weak, the country too poor, the terrorists too entrenched. But he knew something they didn't. Terrorism does not feed on firepower. It feeds on absence, on hesitation, on governments too polite to act. Traoré's doctrine was simple. If we cannot outnumber them, we will outmaneuver them. If we cannot match their chaos, we will destroy it with clarity. And if the world does not believe in our right to fight back, we will fight anyway. His investment in air power, in rapid deployment forces, in real-time intelligence was not a gamble. It was a refusal to let the eastern forests become permanent graves for his people. But make no mistake, this military precision came with a civilian cost, the price of hope. Because when the army acts swiftly, the state must act swiftly too. Roads cleared by drones must be followed by ambulances, teachers, engineers. Towns once silenced must be filled not just with guns, but with governance. And Traoré understands this. In the weeks following Kalari and Ilgende, he dispatched medical teams to affected zones, deployed mobile schools for displaced children, authorized emergency markets for resettled families. He knew that victory fades fast without structure behind it. And something else began to happen, quieter but powerful. Pride returned. In marketplaces, citizens painted murals of fighter jets. In classrooms, students reenacted Kalari, not with violence, but with maps, debates, and imagination. Young men, once tempted by the lure of the rifle, began enlisting not in terror groups, but in the National Guard. And for the first time in years, rural elders held public assemblies without fear of being watched from the bush. But victory is fragile. It demands discipline. And Traoré's biggest challenge now is not the enemy in the forest, but the temptation of triumph itself. Because when power returns, it must remain accountable. That is why he's insisted on transparency reports for every military campaign, why he's refused foreign bases, why he's built command centers staffed by locals, trained by locals, and loyal to the soil, not to Paris, not to Washington. Burkina Faso's people have tasted something rare: protection without occupation, security without dependency, victory without compromise. So now the question becomes, can a state built under siege grow stronger than those built in comfort? If Kalari and Ilgende are any indication, the answer is not just yes. The answer is already happening. Silence, strategy, and the shifting order. While the forests of Burkina Faso burned with justice, the West remained quiet. Not a single headline on primetime television, no urgent speeches at the UN, no flood of hashtags from humanitarian organizations. Why? Because Kalari and Ilgende don't fit the narrative. These aren't stories of desperate Africans begging for intervention. They're stories of sovereignty regained without the permission of Washington, Paris, or Brussels. And that makes the world uncomfortable. In Western war rooms, analysts watch drone footage from Burkina Faso, not with applause, but with concern. Concern that a nation so small, so poor, and so written off had just rewritten the rules of counterinsurgency without needing billions in U.S. aid, without NATO boots on the ground, without IMF-approved stabilization programs. And worse, others were watching too. From Mali to Niger, leaders are studying the Kalari model. How does a country with few helicopters and no aircraft carriers outperform Western-led coalitions? The answer is unsettling. Intent. Traoré is not seeking approval. He is not fighting for media clout. He is fighting for land, for people, for permanence. Compare that to 20 years of U.S. operations across the Sahel. billions spent, advisors trained, outposts built, and yet terror spread. But now, without a single foreign general, Burkina Faso is pushing insurgents into the dirt. And the silence from the West? It's not just embarrassment, it's calculation. Acknowledging these victories would mean admitting that African states can win without permission, without strings, without a savior complex. So instead, they ignore it, pretend it's isolated, dismiss it as temporary. But beneath the silence, a new reality is forming. Burkina Faso is no longer a case study in instability. It's becoming a blueprint for post-imperial defense. So now ask yourself, if a small landlocked nation can defeat terror using its own will, its own skies, and its own blood, what excuse do larger nations have for their failures? Kalari and Ilgende didn't just change a battlefield, they exposed a truth. That real security doesn't come from foreign military advisors, it comes from leaders willing to act. Final reckoning. What if this is just the beginning? A forest once whispered fear. Now it echoes fire. A road once trapped civilians. Now it carries markets and school children. A state once doubted, even pitied, is now a case study in defiance. Kalari and Ilgende are not the end. They are the signal fire, proof that when a nation stops asking for permission, the ground shifts. But here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. The enemy will adapt. They will find new tactics, new allies, new shadows. Already, whispers of retaliation are rising in the north. Foreign media begins to question Traoré's motives. Some say it's too fast, too bold, too nationalistic. But ask yourself, is it too bold to defend your own soil, too fast to save your people? Or is it simply too honest for a world built on quiet control? The real danger now isn't the next attack. It's complacency, believing that 2 victories make a war end. Because wars don't end, they evolve. And so must the defenders. Traoré knows this. That's why he's already expanding surveillance networks, training new rapid reaction forces, and building regional alliances that reject foreign puppeteering. The next chapter will not be written in smoke. It will be written in preparation. And you, the viewer, must now face the hardest question of all. If Burkina Faso can build victory from ash, what can we learn from them? Because the battle against terror isn't only theirs. It belongs to every citizen of every nation who refuses to be ruled by fear, by silence, or by someone else's design. So before this video ends, take a moment, not to clap, not to cheer, but to think. What is more dangerous, a gun in the forest, or a world that refuses to see when Africa fights back and wins? The story is still unfolding, and next time, it may not be about Burkina Faso alone. It may be about a continent that no longer bends. So stay alert, stay awake, and remember, the sky is watching.